Hello and welcome to Post Sports Live. I'm Gene Wong. Joining me this morning to discuss the sports stories that matter most to you in the DMV and everywhere else is our panel from the Washington Post sports staff, starting with on the aisle seat from their lead, Matt Bonesteel. In the middle chair, Mike Hume, national sports editor, and to my left, Roman Stubbs, Maryland basketball and football beat reporter. Guys, thanks for coming here this morning. It's March. It's got to be March Madness. We'll get to that. Also today on the program, we'll talk about the Redskins in free agency. We got the Washington Wizards in decline right now, the Caps on an upswing. And then, of course, a lot of college basketball involving our local teams. But first, off the top, free agency begins today. I think 4 o'clock is when teams officially can sign players. So, Matt, I'll start with you. Which player, if any, should the Redskins be looking at during this period?
I don't think they're going to target anyone that anyone is really going to know. They just need a lot of help on their lines. They need a lot of help at linebacker. They need help at defensive back. I mean, I think it's going to be small pickups.
Right.
So.
Well, Mike, how about you? I mean, there's some linemen that are available. Jake Long just got released by St. Louis. Bulaga hasn't been signed yet. Are any of those guys viable options?
I mean, I think anyone's a viable option because anything is going to be an upgrade over what they already have there.
Sure.
But I think what I would like to see from them is restraint. And they've been better about it in past years, but they were really, really bad about it. And so, again, anything's an improvement. Yeah. If they can get a guy like Brian Bulaga, maybe he's worth the money. But right now, I'd just like to see them get a couple incremental gains, upgrade the depth of the position, particularly along the line and in the secondary. And if they can do that, just add a couple more components to it, it's going to be a good offseason for them. Don't get into any long-term deals that are really going to sink your cap space down the road. That's the mistake they've made in the past, and it's burned them bad. If they can steer clear of that, that's a win right there.
Well, Roman, we've seen the Redskins make some plays in free agency that have not been successful. Should they go after anyone this time around?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, this new sense of conservative kind of the culture with making calculated moves, or at least that seems like what they're kind of intending to do. I think with a guy like Beluga, you'd obviously he's demanding reportedly $7 to $8 million a year, so it'd be interesting to see if they went out on a limb to upgrade their line there. But to me, at safety, it seems like the secondary last couple of years has been a major liability for them.
No doubt.
And I think, you look at the draft, outside of Landon Collins at Alabama, the draft is full, both free and strong. It's full of kind of a lot of mid-round, guys who could come in and maybe contend for starting positions. So it's going to be interesting to see how they gauge that to going out and getting like a Tyvon Branch or maybe even an Antrell Roll or somebody who could come in and be serviceable for their secondary.
Well, Matt, let me ask you, is it more important, do you think, if the Reds are going to do anything for agency to target offense or defense? Which side of the ball needs more work, more attention?
Well, apart from there's the offensive line, which is a problem. They've got to keep RG3 upright.
Yeah.
That's probably goal number one, but they need help everywhere on defense. So, I mean, if they can do that through the draft, great, and they can, sign a bunch of guys to not, rookie contracts, and that will probably help them. But they need to keep RG3 from missing half the season again so he can develop.
Well, Mike, more prudent to wait for the draft to try to build, or can you build in free agency, or at least get a couple pieces that can help big time?
Well, I'm a big believer in building through the draft. I mean, in terms of free agency, you look at the guys that actually reach the market.
Yeah.
They've already been evaluated by their current teams. Mm-hmm. And their current team said, you know what, we don't want this guy anymore. They know them better than anybody.
Or they don't want him for the amount of money that they're asking.
Right. There are certain instances, like in Ndamukong Suh, where they just couldn't afford to pay the price tag. And that's when you can really capitalize, like the Dolphins reportedly have, or will when he signs at 4 o'clock today. Yeah. But, I mean, in terms of long-term growth, the draft is where you're going to find the best value, the best talent. And like Matt said, you need so much help that one or two guys in free agency, they're not going to make the big difference. What they need is a step forward from RG3. So maybe keep him upright, invest in that offensive line. If you want him to be a pocket passer, build a pocket for him. Get a right tackle.
Well, Roman, should Redskins fans be a little more enthusiastic going into this round of free agency, knowing that they have a legitimate GM making the calls?
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot written about his track record and the success that he's had. And yeah, I think there's reason to be optimistic. Again, it's interesting seeing their approach and seeing how he's geared towards the draft and how he's maybe more has an affinity to developing personnel through the draft. So it'll be interesting starting today to see what exactly he does in free agency and how aggressive they are for free agents.
Speaking of teams that have built through the draft, the Washington Wizards, they are headed to the playoffs, but they are not heading to the playoffs on an upswing, it looks like. I mean, they had a rough patch losing streak. They lost 6 in a row. I think they've lost 8 of 11 now, if I'm not mistaken. So, Mike, let me ask you, what needs to be fixed on that team to get them out of the slide?
Well, I think they need to start by playing four full quarters of basketball.
Yeah.
They've really shown a tendency to mail it in the fourth quarter, and it's almost burned them a couple of times. I mean, they almost blew a 35-point third quarter lead the other night. So you need to start by figuring out what's going wrong in the fourth. Is it the rotations? Is it individual performance? Is it just a lack of energy? Jorge Castillo reported the other day that John Wall has been battling some minor injuries and going out there at less than 100%. Maybe he needs a day off.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to find that extra reserve of energy for the stretch run, take a loss here or there, get right, and then finish strong down the stretch.
Well, Roman, do you think that the Bradley Beal's injuries had a lot to do with it, something to do with it, or is it more than that?
Yeah, I think the health across the board. I mean, if they can get Beal to play consistently after the injury, we missed 10 games or whatever it was, get Humphreys back and maybe try to find some health, like Mike was saying, for Wall.
Right.
I think they just need to ride it out. Obviously, the next 3 of their next 6 are tough games. I think they have Clippers, Portland. Coming up, and so maybe Memphis as well. So, just write it out. I think with the Wizards, there's been a lot made about, how easy their schedule was early on, and I think it's almost created these expectations in the back half of the season that maybe aren't unrealistic. And you couple that with the injuries, and it's kind of been a recipe for disaster.
Well, so. Matt, is it a case of just riding it out, or is there something that you think they can do strategically, X's and O's wise, maybe that can get him out of this rut?
Well, I think part of it is what we said about Wall's health and keeping him on the court, with minutes that make sense.
Yeah.
And then also maybe drawing up a few offensive sets that don't seem so haphazard. It's just sort of like John Wall runs around for 3/4 of the shot clock, and then all of a sudden there's 8 seconds left, and he's like, what am I going to do? You know? So it's either to chuck up a bad shot or, make a bad pass or something like that. So I think they need some creativity with their offense a little more, and especially with Beal getting back to hopefully shoot more 3-pointers, because they're just terrible at that. So, I think that will help.
Mike, is it a function of the easy part of the schedule, as Roman was talking about? Now they've had to play the tougher teams, or if Beal comes back at 100%, can they be that team that they were at the beginning of the season going into the playoffs?
Well, I think Roman's 100% right in that the schedule set up very well for them early on, and now we're sort of seeing more of a true reflection of the team. And they're not a team that's going to lose to the 76ers on a regular basis, but they caught them on the wrong night. They mailed it in. They got burned.
That was really bad.
That hopefully will be the low point for this team. But I think they're probably realistically somewhere between there. They're a team that should be an Eastern Conference contender, but at no point were they really that number 1 team in the East where they were going to run away with the conference. I think we sort of see they're a 4 or 5, maybe even a 3 if they get things really together.
You have to get hot to get it.
Exactly.
Right. Well, a team that is hot, the Washington Capitals, they are trying to catch the New York Islanders to win the Metropolitan Division. They've been playing great as of late. Alex Ovechkin is having an MVP-type season. Nicholas Backstrom also having a fantastic season. So, Matt, I'll start with you. Is it realistic to think they can catch the Islanders and win the Metropolitan Division at this point?
It might be realistic, but do they really need to? I mean, if they're win the Met or a wild card, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in the playoffs, because as you see the NHL playoffs every year. There's always one team that
an 8 seed can go to the Stanley Cup.
Exactly,
the goalie gets
it
hot.
happens every year. So I don't think it's that important for them to win the division. I just think they need, they're safely in the playoffs. So I think it's going to be, they'll be fine once they get there.
Well, Roman, let me ask you: if they would win the division and go to that means they're going to the playoffs on a really high note. Is that important for them, or just to get in and then let everything else fall at where it may?
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they could win the division. I think if you look at it from a scheduling standpoint, I think they have 3 more games with the Rangers.
Right.
No more with the Penguins. No more with the Islanders.
Right.
So it'd be difficult to catch. All 3 teams.
They would need some help.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I think the Islanders or the Rangers have played 4 fewer games than the Islanders, and then also 3 fewer games than the Capitals. So I think the schedule sets up where it's going to be difficult for them to do that. But I think Matt's right. I mean, get into the playoffs, gained some traction at the end of the year, last 13, 14 games, and then whatever seed they are, I think they're going to be in contention to at least win a series or two. So.
Mike, where do you stand on that in terms of whether or not it's important to win the division, or it doesn't even matter as long as they get in, which they're going to?
I mean, I definitely think it doesn't matter if they win the division, because we know how this one ends. They play the Rangers in the first round every year. So we know wherever they finish, they're playing the Blue Shirts.
Yeah.
But seriously, I think the confidence level is important. You need to finish strong. They have 15 games left, 10 of them against playoff teams. If they can come out of that stretch feeling pretty good, feeling pretty confident and healthy, most important, I think Mike Green is day-to-day now.
Yeah.
That's
which is
pretty
much
much
his career in general.
course, right?
Yeah.
So if they can get through that stretch healthy, feeling confident, and go into a series against whoever it is, the Rangers, the Islanders, or the Penguins, at full strength, you're probably going to get off on the right foot. And there's still a chance that if they finish in the 7th spot, that they could play the winner of the other division, which is probably going to be the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll see.
Well, Matt, we talked about Ovechkin a little bit earlier. Is he the MVP of this team, do you think, or is it Backstrom? They got a lot of guys. The goaltender, we can talk about the goalie play too. I mean, they got a lot of guys.
Well, we joke around the office. They got 8 Hart Trophy candidates. It seems like it seems like every game there's someone new pops up. But it's got to be Ovechkin. I mean, it's we talk all day about whether he's the greatest athlete DC has seen, as Dan pointed out in a column.
Right.
But it's Ovechkin. He's the guy he's the straw that stirs the drink. So.
Well, Roman, does Braden Holtby have an argument in this, or is it Ovechkin in a landslide, or Backstrom even?
Yeah, I think Ovechkin, obviously he's got the credibility with the city, and he's got that going for him. But goaltending is very important, obviously, and it's going to be important for them moving forward in the playoffs. And I think he's been really productive this year, and I think you would have an argument for that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he plays down the stretch and into the playoffs.
Well, for the Caps, that's always about the playoffs, and see if they can advance deeper than they have in the Ovechkin, Backstrom, Mike Green era. So moving on to college basketball, March Madness, the conference tournaments start this week. The ACC starts today. We got the Big Ten coming up. We got the Big East, the Atlantic 10 coming up. A lot of local teams involved in that. So, Matt, I'll open up with you. Which one of the local teams, we're talking about Virginia, Maryland, Georgetown, GW, has the best chance of winning their respective tournament?
Has the best chance of winning? I would say probably Virginia, just because of the way they've played, and especially, no one really knows when Anderson's coming back, but if they somehow get him, they're probably not going to get him back, I don't think, until the NCAA tournament, but they've proven they can win without him for the most part, except for the other night.
So you have him getting past Duke in the ACC tournament?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Mike, how about you? Which team do you see?
Well, I look at the A10 and I don't see a real clear favorite, so I think GW has the motivation. The only way they're getting into the tournament right now, they got to win it all. So, yeah, I'll throw one for the Colonials. But the team I really like in that tournament, honestly, is Richmond.
Yeah.
They've won 6 straight. Bracket shapes up pretty well for them. They've beaten VCU twice, and that's most likely who they're going to get in their first game. And, yeah, we're extending the region from the immediate locale. But, yeah, I like what the Spiders are doing. If they can get into a semifinal against Davidson, I think it's a coin flip. They both won blowouts on each other's home courts this year. They got some good momentum, and I like what they're doing with the team.
Well, Roman, you've seen it up close. Maryland beat Wisconsin, the number 1 team in the conference. They've had a great season. Do they have the best chance of winning their respective tournament, or is there another local team?
I think it's Virginia.
Yeah.
That has the best chance. I like GW as well,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Maryland will be right there. I think I can see them playing on Sunday. Obviously they're going to play either Indiana or Northwestern on Friday night. They have 2 wins against those teams by a combined 3 points. Then you'll probably see Michigan State likely or Ohio State Saturday, and then Wisconsin.
Michigan State always has his guys ready at this time of the year, right?
Yeah, and so you're going to be seeing teams that are more familiar with them and have scouted them better, and a lot of these teams that are going to be playing again for the 3rd time. So if they advance, so I think Virginia is the team most likely to win their tournament, but. Yeah, why not? They beat Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, albeit it was on their home floor. But, in their one neutral site tournament this year, Maryland, kind of stunned everyone and beat Iowa State.
Yep.
And so playing really well on the road as of late. And so I think they're going to be contenders to win.
Well, Mike, we haven't talked about the Hoyas yet. What kind of chances are you giving them in the Big East?
I think the bracket shapes up okay for them, provided they don't get Xavier in their second game.
That's a bad
They've had some
matchup for
trouble
them.
with the Musketeers.
Stainbrook gives them trouble. Yeah.
But I like what they've done. I think in terms of winning the conference, they absolutely could. I mean, they handled Villanova at home. They got pasted on the road. Neutral court sounds like a good place to decide that series. But I think more than anything, the Hoyas are a volatile team.
Yeah.
On their best day, they can play with anyone. We've seen them take Wisconsin to the wire. We've seen them take Kansas to the wire.
Yeah.
But they don't have that consistency factor. And part of it is Josh Smith
That's
is
big
totally
part of it,
erratic.
right?
Yeah. If he goes a full game without committing a stupid foul, it will be his first time all season. So if they can get right and they click, I think they can absolutely win the Big East. But they got to get it all right.
It's back to Mellon for a second here, Roman. I'll start with you on this one. The media voted Mark Turgeon National Conference Coach of the Year, excuse me. The coaches voted Bo Ryan Coach of the Year, but I'm going to kind of make it on a national scale here among two local coaches, Mark Turgeon and Tony Bennett. Either one of those coaches have a chance to be National Coach of the Year, or should they be in the conversation to be National Coach of the Year?
Yeah, I think they're both legitimate contenders for that. I think Bennett's probably, out of the two, would probably be favored. But I think Turgeon's got a strong case. I mean, you look at, the 9-win differential from last year. It's the second best in Power 5 conferences. And what he's been able to do with a new kind of crop of players, and deal with the adversity that they went through with all the transfers last year. And then step into a new league and do what they've done, 14 wins. I think he's got a great case. But I think Bennett, obviously what they've done with their defense and their consistency all year, would probably be favored of the two in that conversation. So,
Matt, is that how you see it, or are you more?
Yeah, it's got to be Bennett. I mean, few teams impose their will on other teams like Virginia has and doesn't. It's all because of Bennett's system. It's the way they play defense and the way they're patient with the ball and not chucking up shots and especially without Anderson of late, especially in the heat of ACC play. I mean, that's pretty impressive what they've done with only losing to Louisville pretty much.
And he's also done it without Brogdon for stretches, without Prentice too. I mean, he's no question does a fantastic job. Mike, where do you stand on that, given that especially Maryland was picked 10th in the preseason, they came out of nowhere, and now they're a top 10 team. Is that more for credentials to be a Coach of the Year than a team is supposed to win like Virginia?
If you go against expectation, that certainly helps. But I can't think of any reason not to give the nod between these two to Tony Bennett. If you go position by position for any team in the nation, and you think which coach got the most out of every player, it's clearly Tony Bennett, and that goes across any team. And if you're looking at National Coach of the Year conversations as a whole across the U.S., there's a certain undefeated team in Lexington that we should be talking about too.
Absolutely.
So,
but a certain undefeated team with 6 guys who are going to the NBA.
Probably more than that.
It could be in the NBA right now. They could compete with maybe the Sixers in the NBA. So I'm always been of the mind that if you overachieve, then that makes you a better coach. If you have the greatest talent and you win, it's great. That's fine. If you go undefeated, then no problem getting Coach of the Year. But yeah, Roman, I want to ask you about that. Is it strange to you that the Big Ten coaches voted Bo Ryan Coach of the Year, or the media voted Turgeon Coach of the Year, given that I know it was not a neutral court, it was in College Park, but Maryland beat them head-to-head, and Wisconsin lost to Rutgers. Rutgers has 2 wins in the Big Ten. How are you Coach of the Year if you lose to Rutgers? I know that Kaminsky was hurt, but still, I mean, does that seem strange to you?
Yeah, I think the familiarity might have had something to do with it being Maryland's first year. And I think Bo Ryan is so entrenched, and his reputation is so entrenched. Maybe that helped. Obviously, they had a great year, and they're loaded. But yeah, it was interesting, and it was interesting to see certain players as well who were kind of split down the line between the media and the coaches voting, especially Wells and Trimble being on the first team, and then Trimble's on first team for media, and then Wells first team for coaches. So it's an interesting system that they have, and obviously it went all the way up to the coaches and media vote for the Coach of the Year. So
yeah, well, this is I know all you guys feel the same way. One of my favorite times of the year, March Madness. Tournaments start this weekend. Roman, have a good time in Chicago following the Terps. I know I'm going to have a great time in New York following the Hoyas and GW. For Matt Bonesteel, Mike Hume, Roman Stubbs, I'm Gene Wong. Thanks for watching Post Sports Live. Remember to follow us on Twitter @PostSportsLive. We'll see you next time.